My dear fellow Mitpalalim at the Bet Garden Minyan, a good Erev Shabbos. Sorry I won't be with you this Shabbos, so in lieu of our Shabbos morning Dvar Halacha, I'd like to talk about one of the additions that we add to davening, which seems to be above and beyond all the rest. And what I'm talking about is the passage that we usually say after Kel Hadon, Kel Asher Shabbat Mikol HaMaasim, Bayom HaShvi'i Nitala, Beyashav Al Kisei Kevado. That passage seems to be different from all others. The Or Zarua Hagadol says that all the additions on Shabbos, if you forget to say them, no problem, with one exception, this passage. If you forget it, you have to make it up. And as funny as it sounds, the RAMA actually paskens this lahalacha, that we have many, many additions to davening. If you forget to say them on Shabbos morning, no problem. Milvad, im lo amar lakel asher Shabbat, machzirinoto. If you forget to say lakel asher Shabbat, you have to go back and make it up. How exactly do you make it up? So there happens to be a machlokes about what it means to make it up. The Shulchan Aruch Harav, Rav Shneur Zalman Miladi, the founder of the Lubavitch movement, comes along and says that ultimately it means to say it after davening. But if you indeed remember it within the Birkot Kriyat Shema that, hey, I forgot to say this, he ultimately says you shouldn't say it in the middle of nowhere because, A, it's only a minhag, and I'll just add, it doesn't make sense to say it at a different place. The Aruch HaShulchan, Rav Epstein, who made it to the 20th century, basically says that it means to say it exactly where you are, namely anywhere within the Birkos Kriyat Shema, or wherever it might be, but you don't have to go ahead and repeat it after davening. But it seems that both the Magen Avraham, and this is the way the Mishnah Berurah paskens, you have to do anything you can to insert this. Namely, if you're in the Birkos Kriyat Shema, put it in, and if you're already past that place, then make it up after davening. So if we're machmir, like the Rama, together with the Mishnah Berurah and the Magen Avraham, that means that we have to make up Lakel Asher Shabbat under all circumstances, either within the Birkot Kriyat Shema somewhere, or we have to make it up after davening. And my question is this something normative? And indeed, the Magen Avraham says, number one, it's not globally said. He talks about a place called Tol Tila, in which they didn't say it. So if it's so important, how come in certain communities they don't even say it? Number two, we have an ironclad halacha, paskin and Shulchan Aruch, that all the additions that we say in Aseret Yemei Tshuva, Zochenu L'chaim, Hichamocha, Uchtov L'chaim Tovim, B'Sefer Chaim Bracha V'Shalom. If you forgot to say it, you don't have to repeat it. And explains the Mishnah Berurah, it was actually something that the Gaonim, not the Gemara, told us to say, and therefore it's only a minhag, and therefore you don't have to go back. Lakel Asher Shabbat for sure is not in the Gemara, and therefore, why is this so important that indeed you have to go back? Why do we have to go back and repeat it if we forgot it? So, comes along the Aruch HaShulchan and explains, because in all the Birkos Kriyat Shema that we say, there's no mention of Shabbos, namely Hakol Yoducha, Kel Hadon are very beautiful, but there's no mention of the word Shabbos. Only in Lakel Asher Shabbat Mikol HaMaasim, it talks about Shabbos. Bayom HaShvi'i Nitala B'Yashav Al Kisei Kevado. On the seventh day, he elevated himself and he sat in his holy throne. So in that passage, we actually talk about Shabbos, and therefore that's different from all the other additions, and therefore you have to repeat it. If this is the case, then I'm really not convinced, and I'll tell you why. Friday night, somehow, you can go through the Birkos Kriyat Shema, and if you have the minhag of the Gra, or the minhag of the Lubavitchers, not to say V'Shamru, then indeed, a Friday night Birkos Kriyat Shema is complete without a mention of Shabbos. So how come Shabbos morning it's not complete without a mention of Shabbos? And therefore, I'd like to give my own interpretation. The Abu Drams, who explains every word of the Siddur, actually says that in this passage we say something very unique. That on this day, God nitala v'yashav al kisei kevodo. He was elevated and sat on his holy throne, explains the Abu Draham, Nitala al kol ma she'asa b'sheshet yamim. He elevated himself above and beyond everything he did in the 6 days of creation. Well, that's interesting, because for the 6 days of creation, he created all the laws of biology and chemistry and physics and everything else. What did he do on the 7th day? He rested. And that's considered the biggest elevation in the world. I believe the answer to explaining his words is something we went through just a week and a half ago. And that is the holiday of Shavuos. As we all know, there's a famous medrash in which God offered the Torah to all the nations of the world, and they all found a problem with it. The Bnei Esav didn't like thou shalt not murder. The Yishmaelim didn't like thou shalt not steal. And Bnei Ammon and Moab didn't like the fact that there's no incense in the family. That's the way their nation was created. So ultimately, only the Jewish people accepted the Torah. But what was their test? After all, it's very nice to say Nasa v'nishma, but how did God test us that we would be able to indeed receive the Torah? Explains the famous Avnei Nezer that this was their test. Constantly in the Kriyas HaTorah that we read on Shavuos, it says that you have to put boundaries around Har Sinai and not get too close. Indeed, the test of the Jew was Hagbala, the limits. Knowing how to limit yourself, knowing how to tie your hands at times and say, I will not get closer. The nature of the Jew is to get indeed closer to everything, to try to understand everything from inside, from outside. So indeed, when God said, no, do not get too close, says the Avnei Nezer, and I quote his words, Tziva lahem davar shehu neged tiv'an shel Yisrael, this goes against their nature. Ve'af al pi kein, amru na'aseh v'nishma, v'zeu shvachan shel Yisrael. And indeed, they said Na'aseh v'nishma, and they still accepted the Torah. D'zeh yisod kol haTorah. This is indeed the foundation of the whole Torah. Lahagbil et seichel kol adam v'val ya'aros lalot et Hashem yoter mikfil hara'ui lo al pi haTorah v'amitzvah. Indeed, part of Judaism is not just doing, but sometimes not doing. Indeed, on Shabbos, there's so many things that we can do. We had a good chiddush, we want to write it on computer. We heard something in shul, we want to check it out on Google. And we have to tie our hands and say, no. We have to tie our hands and say, Adkan. That's exactly why this passage is so important. God got to his biggest elevation by tying his hands on the 7th day and not creating. That's indeed the biggest test of a Jew. To come, to run towards the wall, and to ultimately say, I can't pass it. I always say that indeed, a great rabbi is not just someone that finds every way possible to make things happen and does things for the community and whatnot. Sometimes a rabbi has to be great by saying, no, it's impossible. It's against halacha. That's indeed why this passage is so important. This passage is so important because every Jew has to, on a Shabbos morning, say to himself or herself, it's wonderful that for 6 days we did so much. We've created, we've done, but there's going to be something even greater. And that is when you tie your hands and you say, I know how to also retreat, not only go forward. And that's why this passage has to be repeated under all circumstances. There is a test of a Jew to do great things. There's another test of a Jew to know how to retreat. Shabbat Shalom.